I have a few housekeeping things that I need to get through so that way you know what to do for the day. The most important thing is to remember where you are at today. If you've attended a School of Data event, you know that I will bring this slide up. And not only are we remembering the over 1 million minutes since we've been together, but we are really on a small little dot. We're on a small little island on this small little dot. The photo that you see here circled in red is the selfie taken from Voyager as it passed through the rings of Saturn. Everything that you do, no matter how small as it is important to your friends, to your neighbors, and to the people that you are passionate about. As you walk through the day, and as I click through the slides, also remember why we are on such beautiful lands. When the Dutch colonists came here, they remarked at the natural beauty that existed on all of the islands that are around here. They were really blown away by the indigenous population that they ultimately displaced and enslaved. The fact that how many different tribes were on these islands. These lands, these islands, these waters, the air that we breathe is special ground. The indigenous population saw these islands as really the bounty with all of its beauty. They had a collective saying, which they were befuddled by these Europeans who came here, which is documented in The Island of the Center of the World by Mark Shorto. The indigenous population, commonly known as the Lenape, said, if no one can own the sea, nor can you own the air, how can you own the land? We are the shepherds of the future. We shepherd our time for tomorrow. And I want you to keep that in mind through every single conversation that you have today. I have met some of you in random weird events, and I am so happy that I have, because we have come together to build this community. And I want you to be thinking about the community connections that you are going to be making throughout the day and online and into the future. The island that we're on right now is known as Blackwell's Island. How many of you know the detailed history that is on this island? If you rode in the car with me this morning, you knew. Where we're standing right now is the grounds of a former penitentiary. To the south of us, we can go to the ruins of an insane asylum that Nellie Blythe, a fundamental journalist, had herself committed so that she could document the atrocities that were being committed right over there. The people that were on the penitentiary of this part of the island were taking care of the people that were sent to the mental institution that was over there. Together, this dark history was attempted to be erased by rebranding it as FDR Island to celebrate a president who himself had quite a few things that we should celebrate. While this land has its troubles, it also has its opportunity to celebrate. We are coming, and we are still in a massive pandemic that science has blessed us with a vaccine for us to be getting together. If you go to the southern tip of the island, you can see a monument to the polio epidemic that plagued our communities up until 1979. And through the miracle of science and vaccines, our nation has been cured of polio. So thank you, science. I just want you to remember these stories as we walk this island and as we walk our islands, because they are important to remember the opportunities that science and technology and data and innovation give us every single day. The stories from this island, the earth beneath our bones, the subway that we take, and the tram we ride, the water that we drink, and the city that we live in comes from a shared struggle for improvement. Our past, present, and future contains no utopias. Ultimately, we are here to minimize each other's suffering and to offer support to those who need it and fight for a better tomorrow. This is not for us, but this is for all of us. So our story really begins through these four freedoms: the freedom of speech, the freedom from want, the freedom of religion, and the freedom from fear. This is the People's First Data Catalog, which is a phone book that Gale helped get printed, also through the Fund for the City of New York, where you could literally flip to a page and see a data set. We, Beta NYC, first got started about 12 years ago, meeting in offices talking about open government information. We come together to celebrate March 7th. We have since wrote the People's Roadmap. I really encourage you to participate in the People's Tech Assembly because you will directly help us rewrite the People's Roadmap. By writing the People's Roadmap, we helped build the infrastructure that we are all celebrating today. We fundamentally connect around 4 freedoms: the freedom to connect, the freedom to learn, the freedom to innovate, and the freedom to collaborate. Here's a bunch of photos. I want to stop at this one by saying thank you, de Blasio administration. While we have many things to beat them up over, we have many things to celebrate in this particular community. If it wasn't for their dedication, we wouldn't have the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, now known as the NYC Open Data team. There was a lot of shared struggles to get these pieces of legislation to get us to where we're at today. School of Data, if you've ever seen Care Bears, this is more or less our shared stance. It's a community conference. We're focusing today on civics, design, tech, and data.
It's so nice to be able to talk to people without being first told that, Zachary, you're on mute. It's just amazing. The opening for New York City Data Through Design. I don't know, how many of you have been to a Data Through Design exhibition before? Some of you. So just last night was the opening of Data Through Design, which takes these open data data sets and interprets them either through visual art or through music. And it's running at the 9 Hall Street Gallery by the Brooklyn Navy Yard through the 13th. Just one of the things that we have as part of New York City Open Data Week. And if you haven't been, I would definitely recommend that you check it out before the week is over. But for those of you who don't know me, who haven't met me either over Zoom or in person, I am Zachary Fader from New York City Open Data. And what we do is we take the information that is used to run New York City government and make it available to people and make it accessible to people. And the available part, in a sense, is really straightforward because, well, we put it on a website and it's available. The accessible part, well, that's a lot harder. And the first thing that we look at is like, well, we'll improve the documentation for it. And for anyone who's interested in looking at the work that we're doing already, some of what we've done to improve documentation, so where we're going, we're holding a session actually this afternoon. So come and join us and hear some more about that. But something else that we've done is think about ways we can engage with members of the public. And 6 years ago, we started New York City Open Data Week with Beta NYC. And thank you, Beta, for being such great partners here over the last 6 years. Open Data Week consists of School of Data, this conference, and thank you all for joining today and helping to make this day such a magical opportunity for people to learn from each other, for people to grow. But then also, today is just the beginning of Open Data Week. There's events again through Sunday the 13th. We have more than 90 events. If you've not heard of Open Data before, there's an Open Data 101 series where we have volunteer Open Data ambassadors teaching people about how to use open data and the basics of it. But we also have events about visualizing data and analyzing it, different programs that you could make to make it easier to find. There's even an event about making slime mold inspired data visualizations. And if you're still drinking your first coffee, yes, I did just say slime mold data visualizations. So there's a pretty broad group of events during Open Data Week. I'd like to thank Anthony and Michael from Cornell Tech for hosting us today, but also having their own events throughout Open Data Week on this campus. I'd also like to thank some of the people that make New York City Open Data possible. And a lot of that is the work of city employees. So we on the Open Data team, we work with city agencies with open data coordinators at every city agency. These people take information their agency generates, identify it, document it, structure it, upload it, maintain it, and then share it. And there's also a New York City Open Data team. And I'd like to especially recognize some members of the New York City Open Data team and Open Office of Data Analytics who are here today. There's Alex Finkel in the back. You'll probably see him around at different sessions today. He's one of the people who helps to publish all of this data. And then Malgosia Brainiac and Kari Bailey in the front, who you already met before, help to organize Open Data Week and work with me every day. And Oliver Bjornson also helped to organize Open Data Week. Thank you all for the work that you do. Thanks to all the city staff for the work they do. And today's also, not only is it International Open Data Day, but it is almost the anniversary of the passage of the New York City Open Data law. So on Monday, it will be 10 years. It's a bit of a birthday party for New York City Open Data since that law was passed. I know Gale Brewer will be speaking in just a few minutes about her work there and making that possible, and it's a result of many people who had advocated for that over years, something where additional laws have passed. It's continued to grow and improve. But really, this is about taking the information, again, that's used to make government work and making it accessible to people, because it really is, it's your information. It's information about your parks, your schools, your streets, your communities, and everyone should be able to see this information and have better access to it. And Open Data Week is really just an attempt to make that vision of people using this information more possible. So thank you all for attending School of Data, and thank you for helping to make Open Data Week what it is. If you want to learn more about Open Data Week, open-data.nyc, you can see all events there. You can sign up. With that, I will turn it back over to Noel.
Excellent. Thank you, Zachary. With that, I get to introduce you to someone that I first introduced 2 years ago. Back then, Gabby was a CUNY fellow, and since then we have had with the generous support of our dear council members, some of them who are in the room, and Borough President Gale Brewer then, and now with the support of Mark, we have been able to hire her. And so now Gabby is a part-time Beta NYC staff member who's still going to school, but she's now leveled up to being an apprentice with us. And so this is a great honor to bring one of our two apprentices that are here on staff today to take you through the next steps.
Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. So first and foremost, I just want to thank everyone in this room today. These past 2 years have been turbulent, to say the least, but it's your presence, your energy, your participation at these events, which drives us every day. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for your love and for being part of this wonderful community. Thank you. Yes. Round of applause. Absolutely. Thank you. Can't skip the volunteers now. I have the pleasure this year of managing our wonderful volunteers, without whom this conference would not be possible. You'll find them throughout the day today wearing this, but in yellow. So stop by, chat to them, say hi. They are wonderful people with such enthusiasm for all things civic tech. So I just wanted to thank our volunteers for being here. We can give them a round of applause. They're awesome. As Noel just mentioned, we have the Civic Innovation Fellowship Program, which is part of CUNY Service Corps. This program is the pillar of all things Beta NYC. And this year we are so proud to mark 8 years of the Civic Innovation Fellowship. It's definitely a true milestone. And so each year, Beta NYC trains a new cohort and teaches people like me about civic data, design and technology practices. And then we're deployed to help the city perform vital research and analytics. And furthermore, our fellows also help to plan School of Data and Open Data Week. So as mentioned, we have this milestone event today, but I do want to give a shout out for another initiative that Beta NYC has ongoing. So it is called the New York City People's Tech Assemblies. In essence, we want to gather your thoughts on all things New York City tech and encourage you to log on to peoplestech.nyc to share your ideas. Our engagement period ends on March 13th. We'll also have a Living Wall Toolkit, which will allow you to share your ideas in person via sticky Post-it notes to be set up at lunchtime today. So that will be up on the second floor. Stop by, share your ideas. They will feed into something called the People's Roadmap, which Noel will talk about a little later. So on that note, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speakers for today. First up, we have Comptroller Lander. Now, Comptroller Lander is very data-driven, and he's passionate about using data to hold the city accountable. We are so excited to have his participation in Open Data Week for the next 4 years. This week, he will be hosting classes throughout the week on the Checkbook 2.0. So without further ado, please welcome Comptroller Brad Lander.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Now, normally in these things, you do it by citywide and then borough-wide and then council members. But I got to say, in this room, the royalty of open data is here. And I would like to propose reversing the order here and letting Gale Brewer, the sponsor of the open data law, speak first and go in order of strength of commitment to open data, which I love and feel proud of. But Gale, come on. You got to. All right. I'm paying credit where it's due. So let's give a big hand to the lead sponsor of the open data law and somebody whose leadership on these issues has really been unparalleled. This is an amazing community that you have built and made more diverse and energetic. But long before, I think there was this breadth of understanding, long before there was this campus, long before there was a shared understanding of what difference open data makes in making our city run better and making it more open and involving more people. Gale really led the way. So I just, Gale, want to say thank you again. Great to be here also with our Manhattan Borough President, Mark Levine. We're in Manhattan, even if it's wonderful to be on Roosevelt Island. I'm New York City Comptroller Brad Lander. I've been to many of these before, and I'm so delighted to be back. To Noel and Gabby and the whole Beta NYC team, thank you. I just especially want to appreciate, there's a lot of co-sponsors, but Beta NYC has worked so hard to build the diversity and grassroots strength of the open data movement, recognizing that there's a power in data to be radically democratic, to bring more people in, to open up our city. But that takes work. It doesn't happen by itself just because the data sets go on the web. It takes building that community of people, and that's how it can deliver for New York City. I also got to say, I also love the vest. There's something about having your 1978 safety patrol meet 2022 open data, where the volunteers are in yellow and the apprentices are in orange. And it's an excellent color-coded system for helping us interpret the data around us. Thank you also NYC Open Data and the new New York City Office of Technology and Innovation, to the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, to the folks here at Cornell Tech for welcoming us all this morning. In the New York City Comptroller's office, every week is Open Data Week. We work really hard to make sure that folks have access to all kinds of data coming through New York City. And one of the things that we're proudest of and that we're leaning into this week is the function called Checkbook NYC, which you can go check out at checkbooknyc.com. And this week, we fulfilled a commitment we made to get done in the first 100 days, putting a tracker up for all the many billions of New York City stimulus funds that we're getting from the federal government, which we launched this week at checkbooknyc.com/stimulus, or you can get there from the controller's website. You can sort of see in some visualizations, but you can also download in full basically every check that the city has written through stimulus funds in the categories and codes that OMB have provided. And then you can see our analysis of why those codes really need a lot of work and aren't all that helpful, and we should do a lot better in the ways that we're interpreting and coding them. And I really feel like that is the spirit of this community, is provide all the data you get, say what you can about it, and push harder to do better so that we can make sure we open it up next time. We will be, as part of our Open Data Week commitment, offering 2 trainings, a 101 on Checkbook NYC for first-time users, and also a power user Checkbook NYC, because it has a ton of functionality. And so if you already use it, check that out. It's part of the Open Data Week offering. We're also really looking forward to pushing forward together with you. My job, part of it, is as Chief Accountability Officer, to make sure our agencies and City Hall are using the information we have to help city government do as well as it possibly can. But boy, accountability in a democracy, in a city as diverse as this, it can't be like the controllers, like the Wizard of Oz behind some curtain, wagging a finger. It has to be a shared task. And so what we aim to do is a much more participatory approach to that job of asking New Yorkers what they think about how things are working. We modeled that with a survey we did with CUNY in the late stages of the campaign, which you can also get on our website, about what New Yorkers think about how agencies are performing. But we also know we could do so much more powerful accountability if we open up the questions we're looking at, the data sets we're investigating. No way the people in our office, as good as they are, can take so much of that data that's out there about how our agencies are working and how they're not working, where they're falling short in meeting our goals for equity and inclusion, where they're falling short of the targets we need to confront the climate crisis, where there's waste and fraud, and where the city could perform better on all our key goals. So we invite you to be partners in that process. If you want to see a little more about what I committed in the campaign, you can still find that at landerfornyc.com. where we speak about what it looks like to imagine technology for an inclusive city. That's got a whole bunch of elements, including making sure we get broadband to people that they can afford, making sure that we're thinking about the pipeline of jobs into the sector, which is so great to be at Cornell Tech and be with a lot of you. And then especially in that chief accountability officer job, to make sure we are working with you through people's tech, through open data, through challenges that we'll do together. So bring us ideas. If you have thoughts on how we could be using the data the city has to focus on particular agencies. This week, I've been talking a lot about sanitation because, boy, every neighborhood I go to in the city, people are like, Brad, have you seen how dirty the streets are? And if you say, well, how do we evaluate that? I can tell you that the sanitation department has a thing called a scorecard. But if you ask me how the scorecard gets put together, you would probably say, well, is the city taking all that 311 data of all the people that are reporting? And I would have to tell you, sadly, no. Scorecard involves a handful of sanitation employees driving around the city in vehicles and marking down on pieces of paper. Maybe they're not on pieces of paper. I honestly don't know. It's possible. They have an app. And filing. And I mean, all bless the Department of Sanitation employees. I don't mean, like they're doing their jobs, but we are not doing ours of using the wealth of data that we have, that is New Yorkers' lived experience, that is reported in all kinds of ways, that reflects deep equity concerns. Black and Latino New Yorkers are twice as likely as white New Yorkers to prioritize that the cleanliness of their neighborhood would make them feel its quality of life was being addressed. So when I was out in Southeast Queens in Community Board 12, people are saying, yes, you want to talk about equity issues? Talk about why our neighborhood doesn't get the cleanliness that other neighborhoods do and that we deserve. But you can't see any of that right now in the ways that the city does an evaluation of a relatively simple thing where we have a ton of data. So please help us, give us ideas. We're going to be asking you for partnership. We are really excited to be partnering in Open Data Week. And like I say, in our office, every day is Open Data Week. So all of you are always welcome. Thank you so much. Have a great Open Data Week. Excited to be working with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Comptroller Brander. Let's give him another round of applause, everyone. Okay, so it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine. And if you follow him on Twitter, as I do, you know that he has been diligent and compassionate when providing us with COVID stats, updated mask regulations, and so much more, no matter how painful they may be. He has brought me a peace of mind. And for that, I am most grateful throughout this pandemic. I thank you. And so on that note, please welcome Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine.
That was beautiful, Gabby. Can we give Gabby Langston a big round of applause? We love having you in the Manhattan Borough President's office. Good morning, civic activists. Great to see all of you. Welcome to the Borough of Manhattan. Thank you, Comptroller Lander, for clarifying that. Yes, we are in Manhattan, right, Gale? I am thrilled to be hosted here at Cornell Tech. For so long, if you wanted a career in technology in New York City, you had to go somewhere else for grad school. And now you have a world-class opportunity right here in New York City, and it's going to change everything. An applause for our host. Thank you, Cornell Tech. I am in awe of what this movement has done over the past decade, and I have no greater gratitude than what I feel for my amazing predecessor, who Noel Hidalgo likes to call the fairy godmother of open data, Gale Brewer. Thank you, Gale. Please applause. Some of you might not realize that really the inflection point in this movement was the moment that she passed the law 10 years ago that forced the city to crack open data that it was not revealing to the public. That made all of your work possible. And what you have achieved over the past decade really started with that moment. So happy birthday, happy 10th, and thank you so much, Gale. Thank you, Beta NYC. Noel Hidalgo, oh my gosh. We're going to nominate you for the MacArthur Genius Award. You can apply for the MacArthur Genius Award and for Noel Hidalgo. We're really honored to have Beta housed in the Manhattan Borough President's office, and we are already doing great things with them. We've been in a big push to get the MTA to install screen doors on subway platforms because it'll make our system so much safer, and they've been resisting. And thanks to our pressure, they dumped, I think it was a 4,000-page PDF or something like that, which had all the data evaluating the feasibility of this technology through the 472 stations. And I think they hoped that by kind of obscuring it in a very difficult to pick apart PDF, that would be the end of the story. But they don't know Beta NYC. So they set to work. They scraped all the data out of that and produced a really easy to understand map that identified over 100 stations around the city where, even by the MTA's own reckoning, this technology is feasible. And I don't think it's a coincidence that within a week of that, the MTA announced a pilot to do this at 3 stations. This is huge. And I think that data played a big role in shifting the public conversation on that. When people could see that there are stops in their neighborhood where the MTA has already concluded this is feasible, they're not going to take no for an answer. This is one example of the power of the kind of work you're doing to bring data together and make it compelling and useful for the public. We're also working with Beta on behalf of community boards, which I think all of you know are really hyper-local form of government in New York City. And they deal with a flood of incoming data, but have huge challenges in making it work for their communities. Beta talks about the idea of data literacy, a skill set that you must continue to hone because the world of data is always changing. And we're really trying to offer a continuous learning system for community board staff and members so that they can use the reams of data now being generated on behalf of their communities. Just one more way that Beta is enhancing our work in Manhattan. For all that we've accomplished, really that you've accomplished, I firmly believe that there is almost no system in New York City, no system of urban life here that couldn't and shouldn't be improved by better use of data. Transportation, obviously, sanitation, as Brad mentioned, public health for sure, human rights, housing, all of it needs data that is transparent and put together in compelling ways. As Gabby mentioned, I think a lot about that in the context of health. I don't think there's any field where we see the devastating consequences when the public is overwhelmed with misinformation. And the clear data that you all are producing has the power to overcome that. And we still need that now for what's ahead for this pandemic and the next public health crisis. So all of you who have chosen this career, thank you, thank you, thank you. We need you now more than ever. I'm looking forward to another great decade of impact and innovation with data in New York City. Thank you so, so much. Thank you. And now you're going to hear from the godmother, right? You can start walking up, Gail. Thank you so much.
Okay, and on a quick note from the Beta NYC staff, I just wanted to give a special shout out to Z, who is our lab manager, and Onej, who is a fellow apprentice with me. They were the brains and the wizards behind scraping that MTA data that the Borough President just mentioned. And so shout out to you, Z and Onej. You guys are rock stars. Give them a round of applause. They're amazing. Where do I even begin with our next speaker? You have made everything possible, Councilmember Brewer. You have been mentioned as the fairy godmother of open data. I would like to add also the fairy godmother of civic tech. If it wasn't for Councilmember Brewer and her expertise pushing for data and technology-driven systems, we wouldn't have the open data law. In short, wise women in government get the job done. You know, they really do. Our community would not exist without you, council member, along with your peers who have fought and continue to fight for open data and good government. So on that note, it is my pleasure to introduce Councilmember Gale Brewer.
Thank you very much, Gabby. This is really an honor to be here today. I want to thank you, Brad Lander. I want to tell you a funny story about Checkbook. When it first started, the gentleman who did it put it up, and one of the first aspects of where the checks had gone was to a purchase by Mayor Bloomberg for wine, which is illegal. You cannot use city money to purchase liquor. So that was fun, made the front page of the New York Post. So I really love when sunshine and transparency are the result of good data. So that was my favorite Checkbook story. And I'm sure that when you regard them, you'll find other stuff. Thank you, Noel. Thank you. Just so you know, Z was my student at Hunter College, and that's how we ended up here. So Z, thank you very much. You are a star student and you're a star data analyst. So thank you so much, Z. That's really a big deal that you're here today. I also certainly want to thank Cornell Tech. I have been here before when it was just an idea, and now that it is a wonderful space. Not only is it a great place for graduate students, but they also host some young people who work on robotics. And it's a place where high school students can learn robotics. So it's a place that has many, many aspects to it, and it's a great location. I want to just tell you 2 seconds about how this bill started, because it is a wonderful story. I was always interested in data, but the person, and I know she's not here, her name is Beth Novick. She's at New York University. She does the tech hub there. And she was the CTO for Bill Clinton. Very unusual to have women, very unusual to have a CTO at that time. And what she taught me in building and passing this legislation was something really important. She said, Gale, your constituents, not the public, your constituents are the city workers, the people who put the data in. And I've never forgotten that. And I do want to thank city workers, because they're the ones, along with people who keep them honest and who, from the public, make suggestions. As a suggestion box, so to speak. But it's a good lesson for all of us. When we're designing something, make sure that the city can implement it and that it has buy-in from the agencies. And then I spent many years meeting with agency staff who do data. And it's a good lesson because it's hard. It's particularly building it from the very beginning. So that's an important aspect of what we do. I just want to mention a couple of places where I think, hopefully, in the last 10 years, it's been helpful. Certainly the fact that Data NYC has spent all that time with the community boards. I really appreciate the Borough President Mark Levine continuing that, because the community boards are our eyes and ears. It's not easy. My dream, of course, and I think Borough President Staff and Borough President share it, is that you go to a meeting like this, and up on the board is a huge screen with the data as we're planning what sanitation issues are in the neighborhood, and we can overlay them with all the other health departments and pest control, the rat people, and the baskets that are mesh and not silver lining, et cetera, et cetera. But we're not there yet. And that's the goal of this data effort, in my opinion. In terms of housing, there's a group called Just Fix NYC, and I think you know it. It's a wonderful group that uses data to identify root causes of displacement, creates data-driven tools to assist tenants stay where they are. And of course, mapping is part of this. Where are the worst evictors? Where's displacement? What are the resources? And they are part of a group that came out of ANHD, Association of Neighborhood Housing Developers, first went to the court, and this is all with Data NYC's effort, all. Going to the court, from housing court, getting the evictions. And then I worked with them took 2 years, just to give you an idea. Data doesn't come easy. It doesn't happen overnight. We finally convinced the court system to tell us, not just, God help us, somebody's about to be evicted. That's horrible for those of you who work with tenants. But could you please tell us, as the eviction is filed before, so we have some way of knowing where we can send in organizers, where we can send in tenant assistants. And Mark Levine was helpful in doing that when he was in the city council, to pass a bill that says every tenant, certain income, deserves a lawyer. But if you don't know that you're about to be evicted and you don't pay attention, then you can lose out on getting your apartment kept. So this data finally got the court to agree to do that. Like I said, it took 2 years, an awful lot of meetings that I went to. The problem, just to give an example, you have all this data and it's on the web. Problem is, it's hard to put that data together with, okay, in Flatbush, on the Upper West Side in Harlem, we have a community group that can go tomorrow to make sure that this problem is solved. Those are the ways in which we still need to work together to use the data. And still, the data has a lot of challenges too. But it's an example of housing evictions tracker being used in a way that is supportive. So it's just something we have to keep in mind, because as I deal with, as we all do, the end of the moratorium, we want to make sure nobody gets evicted. Another example is risk-based inspection system at the fire department, because the fire department draws data from a variety of sources, as you can imagine, to identify the buildings that pose the greatest fire risk, empowers our first responders to be prepared. And I know that there have been some challenges, but let me give you an example of one. Oh my goodness. During the Bloomberg administration, a huge, very expensive Grumman system was put up for all first responders. I think it's in the toilet. I don't even know that it exists. This was a situation in which we were going to have our water, The Port Authority was going to be involved, all first responders, etc. So sometimes when we build these big systems, we have to take a lot of time to make sure that they really work. This was an example. Now there's new systems, perhaps working better. Those of you in the room who are working on them know better than I do. But I was there when Grumman was put in. We signed off on a major purchase, and it hasn't been effective. And perhaps nothing's more important than when the fire department is going into a building to make sure that it is the data that they really need. So it's an example of making sure the data is correct. I also want to just talk about the city council. We have a wonderful data team, data analytics. Most recently, they've been helping me with shoplifting. We all know that there's a lot of shoplifting going on. And so I wanted to know, where are the shoplifters doing their most busy activity? And it turns out, as we are looking not finalized, and we've been working with the Manhattan District Attorney, who, as you know, has been meeting with a lot of the business people. I think what's happening, and I want to thank Eddie, who's here from our office, because we were also looking at it, that the shoplifters are most busy on the Upper West Side and the Upper East Side, more so perhaps than in other neighborhoods. And then when you have that kind of data, you can say to the local police department, this is what we need, or to the local Dwayne Reed, or to the grocery stores, let's work on this together. But when you have that data, because normally we hear, oh, it's terrible, shoplifting everywhere. And that's maybe true, but if you can pinpoint it with this kind of data, it makes a huge difference. And what's funny about the 311, you have to make sure that you have petite larceny, and then in parentheses, shoplifting, because there's about a million other kinds of theft. I've learned that recently. I also just want to say that the City Council has worked with parents, school employer, to figure out all the information that the public schools have and that they can then help in terms of parent input. I find the DOE website challenging. I don't know about you in terms of data. So anything we can do to make sure that it is explained is a good thing. Same thing with the paid equity law. It was a law of local law 18. I'm sure Mark Levine knows it. And the idea is to make sure that we have detailed information about the city's workforce. Pay equity, I think it was Helen Rosenthal that passed that bill, or maybe it was just James, but we have Equal Pay Day on March 15th, and you can see the gap between men and women in terms of pay. Another example. So I'm here to say these are some examples. The only one I want to mention finally is dark stores. You know, I am focused on these friggin' stores. I don't know if you've seen them. They are large. They have warehouse-like items in them. You can't usually go in, although sometimes they're figuring out if I go in, then I'll be in accordance with the zoning. Hell no, you're not in accordance with the zoning. You don't have labels on your products. You don't have a scale. You don't have cash. And sometimes the windows are covered. So then we want to know, where are these things? Thank you, Beta NYC. Thank you, Z. So what we found, no surprise perhaps, is that last October, there were 20 of them in Manhattan, and now there are 48 in Manhattan, and there are 115 in the city of New York. That's a pretty big jump. So with that data, I know the city of New York is here. It's not necessarily your agencies, and you have no idea what to do. I got it. But this data could help you to say which one of these buildings is in conformance with the zoning and which are not. You just layer that. So I'm looking forward to hearing from city planning and DOB, but it's only the data, and it's only the map, and it's only the great work the Beta NYC has done that shows this is where the problem is. And it really is, the data is the transparency. And that's what's so exciting about the work today. So congratulations. I look forward to hearing much more from you. And I want to also just give a shout out to Silicon Harlem as another example of an organization that is constantly figuring out how to use this data in Harlem. Thank you very much. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Gail.
So my name is Michael Samuelian. I'm the founding director of the Urban Technology Hub here at Cornell Tech. And hubs, for those of you that are not familiar with what a hub is, we're essentially outward-thinking think tanks. So we focus on real issues and bringing our research to applied technology area. I consider a lot ecosystem engagement. So that's events like this, bringing people together to talk about technology and cities, which are two very near and dear issues to my heart. And then lastly, we have, and maybe most importantly, we have a brand new 2-year master's degree with a concentration in urban technology. And I'm really thrilled to have some of our students, graduate students here. So those of you who are thinking about graduate school, we're going to graduate our first cohort in May of this year, which we have at least one representative with us today. So has everyone here heard of the Rebooting NYC report? Anyone not? Let me go the other way. Anyone not have no idea what I'm talking about? Good. This is for you and everyone else. So we issued a draft of this report back in May of last year, right before the mayoral primaries, the other local primaries, with the idea of taking a proactive view towards the ways that technology can actually help make the city work better and work more fairly. So this was a completely nonpartisan report. It wasn't written with one mayor in mind versus another mayor in mind, but it was thinking about the mayor and the council and other citywide officials to find ways that off-the-shelf technologies could be deployed in New York City specifically in order to make the city work better. And this is a good example of when we say applied research, it's what are real problems that we can take existing technologies and take them to. There's also another side of the spectrum that I don't want to fail to mention where we look at the future. And my colleague, Anthony Townsend, is here, who I failed to thank. Anthony has been really the engine that helped make this happen on our side. And Anthony published a horizon scan this past fall looking at 10 years in the future, what are the technologies that are going to be changing cities and how will cities be affected by changing technology. So I invite you to check that out as well. But the report was really about thinking on ways that technology can help New York City improve its system and also improve its fairness. This report, over a dozen people worked on it, predominantly graduate students, but we also had some alums work on it, some folks from the Comptroller's office and other interested parties, but this was absolutely a collective effort. I'm happy to say, and it's somewhat bittersweet, that it was led by our senior urban tech fellow here, Rit Agarwal, who now is the DEP commissioner and chief climate officer. So I'm very glad that the city has stolen him from us, but he really led this effort and was the main architect for the report. But it was very much a collective effort, chapter by chapter. The idea of the report was really to think about how we could be proactive with regard to the role of technology. We interviewed lots of people who worked with technology and cities and thinking about ways that technology can help systems work better and more fairly. Met with elected officials after the draft issued back in May, and then we actually met with a larger subset of community groups, over 100 groups, talking about reactions to the report and ways that it could be improved. And the final report was issued this past January. The screening criteria for what got into the report, this report didn't try to do everything. It was about areas where technology could be deployed by the city almost immediately. So literally off-the-shelf technologies that other places were using and how that could be brought to New York. We also concentrated solely on areas that the city had predominantly 100% control. So you won't see the subway mentioned here, subway's a big issue, but the city does not have that much or really very much control of the subway system itself. So you won't see us mentioning the New York subway system, but that doesn't mean it's not important. It just was beyond the scope of the report. And then could these ideas be implemented in a relatively short order? Could they be done in a term? Try to think about a politician's mindset. And this is something, while long-term infrastructure improvements are important, but are these ideas implementable in the near term? And that was important in terms of screening out what we actually began to look at. There are 5 main areas that we focused on. One was foundation. What do we need in order to get technology to help people and help urban systems improve? Bringing equity, and I'm assuming we're going to talk a lot about equity here, because if you don't have access to technology, it almost doesn't matter if the technology is good, bad, or otherwise. But if we don't have broadband available to your home, then how are we actually going to be deploying the technology tools that we have? Urban systems are critically important to how cities function. We heard earlier today that data and open data is empowering our understanding of improving systems. I teach a course here on urban systems that these young people were fortunate enough to take, and everyone got an A. Good job. Urban systems and how they really power the city that we live in. And we think of urban systems in terms of the hard systems, so making streets work better, making electricity flow better, but also the softer systems, the social systems, or cultural systems, or political systems that undergird our city. Public engagement is also an incredibly powerful tool that we've learned over COVID, that we have the tools of technology that were already here, and yet we accelerated our adoption to them in incredibly powerful ways that actually improved public engagement in a deep way. And then finally, future-proofing. What is what are the future technologies that we should be thinking about now? So as a non-technologist, full disclosure, I'm an urban planner, not a computer scientist. There was a lot of talk in the tech community of disruption. And yet when you disrupt, a city, which is a pretty delicate system, whether it's the impact of Uber on taxi cabs or the impact of Airbnb on people who work in hotels, we need to be aware of how we can anticipate new technologies and what the positive and negative sides of disruption are. So thinking about a task force or a group that could actually think about what is the future of New York City and what are some future technology that we need to take into consideration. Privacy and procurement is something that for those of us that work in city or have worked in the city, that one of the gating issues for how cities can engage with technology is the fact that it's hard for them to buy new technologies, that we get really encumbered in some of these institutional processes. So we talk a lot about the role of procurement and technology procurement in cities and how we could help accelerate the adoption of better technologies for cities. Equity, which is a term I didn't make up, but I've heard of it. Not sure it's a real term, but bringing technology and equity together and how we could actually bring more equity to technology, which typically trickles down from the top down to communities. But can we find ways of actually bringing technology to people's homes? I think many people here already know some of the fact that nearly a third of New Yorkers do not have broadband access. Many just use their phone for internet access. And we began to question, why do they just use their phone? Is it by choice or is it by necessity? But even coming up with an idea in this report of creating a broadband development corporation to basically say the city should be the one kind of laying the pipe, and then private providers can always provide the wires in between it. But thinking proactively about, is this a role that the city should be playing? Is access to digital infrastructure the same as opening a tap like water? So if we're going to say that, oh gosh, well, people just want to use their phone, that's just saying everybody has to drink bottled water. And you don't have the right to turn a tap and take a shower or turn a tap and get water from your sink. So thinking about the fact that the public should, in some cases, take a far greater role with regard to the deployment of technology. Optimizing systems, which I talked about earlier, so everything from how we pick up trash to how we use our streets, and anticipating greater equity in terms of how we use our streets, and thinking about the role of micromobility in terms of bringing goods to people. That we all live with a lot of congestion, and certainly over the COVID pandemic saw the streets clogged with Amazon trucks and food delivery. Great for those folks who were not comfortable going to stores, but also pretty intense in terms of the impact on our street network and congestion, certainly air. And since some of us are architects and designers, we also think a lot about the built environment. So other ideas of how we can say, you can get rid of a third of the sidewalk sheds in New York City if you use drones for building inspections. And are there ways that we could safely use drones? And drones are probably a triggering word for some people, but are there safe ways that preserve privacy, but you can use new technologies to actually improve the built environment that we all, and then finally, thinking about how we could digitize democracy and improve public engagement through the tools of technology. As we all know, for the most part, every meeting that happened with public agencies or community groups went online during the pandemic, and we actually thought that was a very powerful move to actually be more inclusive in terms of public engagement, and we use new communications tools to engage the public in a deeper way. And then future-proofing and thinking about, as I said, what is the future of technology for New York City, and how can we get ahead of the private sector to some extent in terms of anticipating the fact that we know there are technologies out there that are coming, and rather than being reactive, can we be proactive with regard to new technologies in the urban environment? So finally, a little commercial for the report. Please download it. It's available free as a PDF if you go to our website. And I'm really excited now to stop talking and start to ask some of our students who authored many of the chapters on this report their thoughts, specifically with regard to their research on the report, but then also the role of open data in crafting the report in the first place.
Welcome to this talk. I'm going to speak a little bit about Open Broadway Data. My name is Yaakov Bressler. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the problem with Broadway Data. I'm going to talk about the evolution of this solution, which is a data platform, but why a data platform, why not something else? I'm going to talk to you about how we're maybe changing the future of Broadway with data, and then what comes next. Here's the problem. Broadway's been around since a long time ago. The first show that the historians in the room can argue about this, 1738. So that's 284 years ago. There's been over 10,000 shows in 365 theaters. And it's a lot of data. Where is it? Can you use it to answer interesting questions? The answer is not really. So that's not good. Here's a solution. Let's make that data available. Cool. Here's my solution. Open Broadway Data is an open data platform which aims to collect, display, and analyze data from all Broadway shows since 1738. How did we get here? Why data platform? Why not something else? The evolution of the technical requirements. That's a little bit of the story. And the evolution of the use cases. So to tell you about how I came to be here, we're going to rewind the clock, but we're going to traverse time instantly. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 phases of my life, my career that got me to where I am today, that got this platform to where it was. Phase 1, I was producing theater, and I wanted a historical data set to train and test predictive models. Pretty academic. The next phase, a few years later, I was working in tech, and people would reach out to me because I wrote an article. They're like, hey, remember that data set that you used? Can I have it? And so I would update it and send it to them. And then phase 3 is just after the George Floyd reckoning. I had social activists who reached out to me and said, hey, we're trying to prove this thing. We need data. Can you help us? So these are the motives. We go from one individual to like larger collective. And I think that's really like my personal. Let me show you a little bit about the technical requirements that go into this. I wish I could just say, yeah, it's a Google Sheet, go in, copy the rows you want, and it's done. It's a little bit more complicated. If this picture looks a little crazy to you, it is a little crazy. If you've ever built out something very technical, you'd be like, oh, this is a simplification. It's even more complicated. This stuff is difficult. So let's start with phase 1, a little blue box, historical data set. I had the data on my computer. You want it? I'll email it to you. Phase 2, you want the data too? Let me update it and send it to you. We could do a static file. If it's very big, I can send you in groups and zip. Okay. Phase 3, you want to add demographic data. Whatever that means. In order to do that, you now need an editing interface. You need to be able to prove that and roll back and so on. But hang on a second. You have demographic data? Where are you storing that? What information are you including? Are you including people's date of birth, their addresses, potentially? Which countries they've migrated from? Well, who knows? This is really sensitive. So you need to be able to store that in a way that protects these people's information. There's like a lot of components there. Okay, so let's zip up. Number 5. Now, this thing's going to get really slow if you have a bunch of people using it at the same time. If you're doing large data manipulation, this thing needs to scale. Otherwise, you're waiting all day for it to work. And the last thing is, if we've got all this protected data that's important and keeping people's safety, you don't want to get hacked. So you have to be resilient. So this is a little bit of the story, a tiny, like, I would say like inch deep, mile wide view of the technical requirements that are required for us to get to this goal of helping social activists. Okay, so a little side note here. Why so much cybersecurity stuff? Like, am I paranoid? Maybe I am. I mean, I work in tech. I guess we read reports and stuff. But at the end of the day, this platform needs to be trustworthy. You're not going to approach an artist or an activist and say, hey, tell me really important information that might get you put in jail in other countries about your identity without being absolutely confident that it's secure. And I guess like my quip is, you don't want lists of names floating around the internet with all the people who are like identify as queer, living in Manhattan, doing this thing. That would be very bad. So that's why there's a lot of cybersecurity. Okay, so let's go out of how we made it. Let's talk about the use cases. Way back when I was producing theater, this is a question that I was trying to answer. How do you get a show to succeed? I'm not going to go deep here. If this is interesting to you, come speak to me after. I'm going to fly through here. Basically, this is a survival plot, and it says, doesn't matter how much people pay. If they're in the seats in a theater, you're going to do well. It seems obvious. It's quantitative statistics here, so we'll skip it. Okay. How has show genres changed over time? The opera was really popular in the 1800s, and the musical is really popular in the 2000s, so there's this evolution. The credit goes to Nikhil Kamat, up in the right corner. Okay, phase 2. Other people asked for this data. Check-in time. So who are these other people? I don't have any like model to show you here, but like generally, the people who reach out to me the most were graduate students and researchers. And then decreasing frequency, theater producers, financial institutions, and media executives like HBO people, because I guess they're like trying to build a new TV show. So other people are asking me for this data. And there's an endless amount of information to show you about all the things they worked on. And I can't really share it because it's not mine and I don't have time to ask them for permission. Here's just one glimpse. This is research from a then student, now I guess like doer, Samantha Pierre. This is a quantitative model. I'm not going to go too much into it because I don't really understand entirely, but basically it asks the question, if you are nominated or win a Tony Award, what does that mean for your business? And the answer is not so clear. It may or may not be good. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So you can imagine, like, when it comes into this phase, all right, here's a lot of stuff. Okay, so what you're seeing on this screen, you can't see anywhere else because the data is on our platform and you have to like go through the approval process. But before I get into it, the data here is sampled from any director of Broadway who's directed a show since the year 2010. Now, you don't need to be a mathematician to say, wow, this is dominated by, you look at blue, dominated by men. Most Broadway directors are men. Most Broadway directors are white. I don't need to tell you that it's 90%. If you look at the total count, the 95% of the total productions, just look at it. It's a wall of blue. There's one Asian director since 2010. One. Come on. That's ridiculous. Okay, so I'll speak a little bit about how we're, but you can appreciate that this data is now in the hands of people who've asked for it. That's pretty powerful. All right, I'm going to fly through. Line designers, all white men. Most of them graduate from Yale. 2 students per year in the MFA program. Almost guaranteed a job as a Broadway line designer. 2 per year. Orchestra contractors. These are people who hired the orchestra pit. 3 people have hired 80% of all orchestra musicians since the year 2000. Okay, so how can you change the future of Broadway? You can't fix a problem you can't see. And activists are using this data to open people's eyes. And they're using it to ask for systematic change. It's working. This project's key collaborators were the Black Theater Coalition. And with our data, they were able to secure over 30 fully paid apprenticeships for Black Broadway professionals to get their first careers, to get their start in the career. It seems obvious, right? You look at this data, you go, obviously. Okay, so what comes next? More activism. The people who care about these things need to find people like myself or platforms like this to keep going. And I'm still here, so let's go. And then we need to improve this data platform. I'm not going to go too much into it, but you can imagine this requires sophisticated technical platforms. It needs to be robust. The current functioning site is a POC. We kind of did it just to prove it could be done and get this one thing out the door. It needs to be revamped. We need more data. So we need organizations who want their data to be open and maybe want us to have it. So if you want to get involved, I need you. This platform needs you. If you're technical, please participate. If you are from an organization that has data, we want to partner with you. And if you're a social activist, you get a little star because this platform is built for you. And let's solve problems together. Here's a little picture on some of the names of people who worked on this platform. It's not done by one person, it's a group of people. Thank you, all of these people, for doing the work that you do.